Good evening. I think this is our galaxy. I'm not sure where we are. Maybe small, might be our sun over here, or somewhere in there. Before I start my talk, I would like to say there's a large gap in what I have to say, which concerns First Nations. And I decided not to speak on the many bands and First Nations that comprise the Coast Salish linguistic group that is dispersed throughout the region. I don't feel competent, or it is not my right to speak about them. So I just wanted to mention that because there is a gap in my talk that relates to all of the land questions and other questions of the environment and their autonomy within the regional system. In the following remarks, let me see, can I do without this machine here?
Well, no, because actually
we are recording. Yes. All right. In the following remarks, I propose to set a regional frame for the discussion we will be having tomorrow. There goes the galaxy. A discussion tomorrow which is principally focused on the city of Vancouver. My talk will be descriptive, but I will endeavor to highlight some of the problems we face collectively as we move further into the new millennium. I don't pretend to be an expert on the region that I first got to know when it was still being referred to as the Lower Mainland. And that was in 2001, when after a 5-year sojourn in Melbourne, Leone and I moved to Vancouver. And so I beg you to correct me should I make a relative newcomer's errors in speaking about a region that many of you know far longer and much better than I do. Let me begin by situating Vancouver and its metropolis in the much larger bioregion of which we are a part, which has come to be known as Cascadia, or as called by its older name, the Pacific Northwest, which crosses the Canadian border to incorporate large swaths of British Columbia, Washington State, and Oregon. The actual regional boundaries are none too precise, but before we launch into the urban, it is good to be reminded at the start that we are part of an immense ecosystem that has shaped the regional culture and encompasses the watersheds of the Fraser and Columbia rivers, and one of whose prominent marks are the coastal mountains that in the United States across the border are called the Cascades. Delineating this region has environmental stewardship as its primary goal. I won't take this theme any further tonight, but mention it as a reminder of the ecological foundation that is our primary wealth and on whose continued health and regenerative power our lives depend. The metropolitan area of Vancouver extends across the floodplain of the Fraser River Delta. To the north and east, the region is cradled by the coastal range. To the south, it is delimited by the international border, and to the west, it opens up to the Strait of Georgia and a string of small islands that hug the 500-kilometer-long coast of Vancouver Island, at whose southernmost tip lies the provincial capital. Taken as a whole, it is a tightly interconnected urban region of multiple centers, or perhaps we should begin to calling it a regional city, which is more than 2.3 million people and an average population density of about 800 people per square kilometer. Together with the closely integrated urban centers on the slopes of the North Shore, Vancouver, Burnaby, New Westminster, and Richmond comprise the economically dominant part of our regional city. But cities to the south of the Fraser Delta are catching up, turning from erstwhile bedroom communities into complete cities that are beginning to challenge Vancouver's regional hegemony. Here I have in mind primarily Surrey, Langley City and Township, White Rock, but also the gigantic Delta Port at Roberts Bank, whose major expansion projects are beginning to change the face of our landscape. A significant part of the southern and eastern parts of the metro region have been set aside as an agricultural land reserve, which constitutes about 20% or 1/5 of the total land area. But this reserve serves adjacent urban areas in multiple ways, and it is quite properly fully a part of the regional city. Let me give you a few salient statistics about this city. Between 1991 and 2011, 20 years, provincial population grew from 3.3 to 4.4 million, while the Vancouver Metropolitan Area, which had accounted for 48% of the province at the beginning of this period, gained 4 percentage points over the 20 years, rising beyond the halfway mark to 52%. Population is thus concentrating more and more in the metropolis, a trend that is likely to continue. By 2041, 3 decades from the last census, the metro area is projected to grow to nearly 3.5 million, thus raising average demographic density to 1182 per square kilometers and 1418 per square kilometer if we exclude the land reserve, making it one of Canada's most compactly settled urban regions. The regional strategy to which all municipalities have signed on assumes that this increase will take place inside the designated urban containment boundaries. The agricultural land reserve is not supposed to be used for urban expansion, though it is currently still under the protection of the ALR Provincial Commission. Pressure for more intensive uses is likely to increase over the coming decades. In 2011, 924,000 denizens of Metro Vancouver in the 2.3 million spoke a mother tongue other than English or French, comprising 40% of the total population. Chinese speakers accounted for 35% of this total, followed by Punjabis with 15%. Altogether, 2/3 of the foreign languages spoken in the region were accounted for by only 6 groups, including, in addition to Chinese and Punjabi, Tagalog, Korean, Farsi, and Hindi. This regional city is thus becoming a multilingual cosmopolis increasingly connected through family ties to countries primarily in Asia. The stream of Asian settlers is expected to continue with an estimated 30 to 35,000 yearly landed immigrants, most of whom will make their home throughout the emerging regional city. Our regional government has projected Vancouver, the region's largest city, to 770,000 by 2041. If we include all of the communities north of the Fraser, what I've called the economically dominant region, the population of this area is projected to 1.8 million. But the communities south of the river are growing considerably faster, and by 2041 are expected to reach a total population of 1.3 million. By virtue of their size, ethnic diversity, local employment, the former bedroom communities are becoming decidedly urban. Economically, however, growth is unevenly spread across this range of urban centers. The following data are from the most recent, if not altogether reliable, 2011 census. Taking median family income as a basis for comparison, the average household size was 2.58 in 2006 and is expected to decline. The range is from West Vancouver's $84,000 to Vancouver's $56,000, and still further to Langley City's $50,000. For comparison, the median for British Columbia, the province as a whole, was $69,150. In short, half the families in places such as Vancouver and Langley have to manage their lives with an annual median income per person that falls below $22,000 for the first and $19,000 for the second. For many, these numbers suggest a life lived on the edge of poverty. The voices of this lower half of the income distribution have not yet been heard in regional politics. But if Greater Toronto is any indication, they may well come to defend positions that will put them at loggerheads with enthusiastic advocates of regional infrastructure projects to accommodate growth. Local employment is becoming increasingly decentered. Here are some indicators projected to 2041. North Shore communities, 109,000. Northeast communities, 148,000. Burnaby, 203,000. Delta and Richmond, 259,000. Surrey and White Rock, 301,000. Langley City and Township, 125,000. All of these add up to 1.2 million jobs, which is more than double the city of Vancouver's 482,000. The 21 so-called suburbs of Metro Vancouver are thus unequivocally growing into complete cities, which is what the regional strategy calls for. But in becoming urban in this fuller sense, local authorities must be enabled to deal with the multiple problems generated by this process effectively, fairly, and efficiently. This poses a series of problems in regional governance whose solution will require the combined efforts of all levels of government over the next few decades. These and the other projections I have cited are of course only rough approximations based on assumptions such as no disruption from major wars, natural catastrophes, major global political realignments. They are not predictions, but informed guesses concerning general trends. And here's what they mean to me. We're becoming a compact, interdependent urban region that is articulated through a complex transport and communications network. The southern part of our regional city is growing faster than the northern part, with arms of the Fraser River and the Burrard Inlet being major divides. Urban and rural are thus no longer distinguishing features in the landscape, or even useful analytical categories. As a result of growing local population and employment growth, the agricultural land reserve will be under increasing pressure to give way to a variety of urban uses. Remember that even year-round agriculture in our metro area requires substantial investment in hothouses and other equipment required for intensive farming. And in this sense, even farming becomes inherently an urban activity. Perhaps the most important structural changes are occurring in the southern part of the region, where the rapid rise of Surrey and to a lesser degree of adjacent Langley are particularly prominent. This is also the region traversed by the Roberts Bank Rail Corridor, a 70-kilometer stretch connecting Canada's largest container facility and major coal terminal with the North American rail network. According to TransLink, which is currently making huge investments to facilitate container and coal shipments across the region, 388,000 vehicles cross the railroad tracks on a daily basis, and their number is projected to more than 500,000 within 10 years. This volume of traffic, which may well double in the 20 years beyond that cutoff date, is an indicator of the accelerated urbanization process that is taking place across Delta, Surrey, and Langley. TransLink is constructing 9 grade separations at critical junctures to prevent the snake-like crawl of freight trains from backing up north-south as well as local traffic. But in the decades ahead, there will no doubt be a huge volume of trucking that the Roberts Bank Superport will generate as well. The implications of this for local urban development are deserving of closer study. I've already noted the decentering of the urban economy of our regional city, which is intimately related to population trends. On the one hand, many Asian settlers are choosing to live in the smaller, more affordable communities in outlying urban centers, often with the help of fellow nationals who have already settled there. This continuing stream of immigrants brings with it multiple challenges to local authorities as they endeavor to promote the social, economic, and cultural integration of newcomers with already existing populations. Much of the rental housing market, for example, will be under growing pressure to provide affordable housing, at least on a temporary basis. Jobs must be created along with affordable housing. Poverty must be alleviated, social tensions reduced, and particular attention needs to be paid to the needs of young people as they adjust to Canadian and more specifically to BC culture. And all of this will not come cheap. Before concluding, I would like to make a brief comment on the issue of regional governance to which I've already alluded. The GVRD, recently renamed Metro Vancouver, was created by the provincial government as a governing institution for our regional city. It has multiple functions with which I'm sure you're all familiar, but from a planning perspective, perhaps the most relevant is its responsibility for the collaborative process that has resulted in the most recent regional growth strategy, which was adopted by the board at the end of July 2011. It is this document from which much of my knowledge of the region has been drawn. What impressed me the most as I read through the document is the sustainability framework that informs it. Allow me to quote from it, a couple of small quotes. The first is regional vision. The highest quality of life, embracing cultural vitality, economic prosperity, social justice, and compassion, all nurtured in and by a beautiful and healthy natural environment, achieved by an unshakable commitment to the well-being of current and future generations and the health of our planet in everything we do. And then the next sentence, sustainability imperatives, to have regard for local and global consequences and long-term impacts, recognize and reflect the interconnectedness and interdependence of systems, be collaborative. These are noble words, and my overall impression is that the report accurately reflects them. Entitled Shaping Our Future, it embodies the collective wisdom of those whose signature commits the many local communities of the region to this vision. As a collective effort, it is an inspiring document. But let's remember that the region is a dynamic urban system that is constantly reshaping itself as global, national, and regional forces impinge on it. I've tried to summarize some of them in my remarks as we adjust to sustainability imperatives, migratory flows, and the fluctuating global markets within the strategic framework. We may, as the strategy tells us, have a sustainability imperative, but we also have other and more short-range so-called imperatives that must be brought into some sort of balance with the overall planning frame, such as fully integrating the hundreds of thousands of immigrants from abroad who will be arriving in the regional city hoping for a better life or serving the unmet imperatives of social justice by reducing existing inequalities that range from First Nations claims to opening up new channels of social mobility via educational and other reforms, particularly aimed at the younger generation. The changes which are coming and which will test our best resolves are certain, but they are not as such predictable. What we need is to think how best to prepare for the many different kinds of challenge we will have to confront as we move forward. One such challenge is strengthening local capabilities for governance, whether through formal restructuring, which would require provincial legislation, hiring practices, special training courses, reaching out to local populations and the like. An emphasis on local capacity building, however, spread throughout the many local government units of the region is only part of the story, however. As we have learned from organization literature, the devolution of powers to local authorities calls for a strengthening of the center as well. Here, I might mention the assumption by Metro Vancouver of new responsibilities with regard to economic development, a function that at present is specifically excluded from its roster of responsibilities. Yet economic development is quintessentially a regional task that requires more than local promotion. Relevant policy research, policy formulation, and implementation are also required. And it would make sense to concentrate these functions rather than disperse them to local authorities where they now rest. A second function, surprisingly absent from shaping our future, is responsibility for regional disaster management. This is particularly important for a region situated on the Ring of Fire. Over the next several decades, an even greater danger is probably posed by floods and rising sea levels that threaten significant portions of the region, of the regional city. Again, disaster management is both a local and a regional responsibility, but the regional component has not been officially recognized as a legitimate function of the district. I want to close by addressing a few words to my colleagues here in SCARP. In the 13 years that I've been in our school, I've heard very little talk about regions. Occasionally, one or the other of our students does a bit of research whose focus is not limited to Vancouver, and the present symposium is no exception. We sometimes act as though each Vancouver neighborhood is an island unto itself, and places like Coquitlam and Pitt Meadows might as well be on the other side of the moon. That has got to change. I want to propose that we begin a serious effort to making metropolitan studies a significant part of our curriculum and of the research we undertake. Economic development, with particular attention to equity and environmental issues, should be given even greater attention. We have a range of municipal sizes in the Vancouver area, each of which has its specific challenges as we face the future. We should also think more deeply about governance issues, which I have mentioned only briefly and which require a much deeper understanding of regional politics than I've been able to bring to it. I have also briefly touched on the Roberts Bank Superport and how it is likely to impinge on the southern portion of the region. But that was posed more like a question that was based on ignorance. We now need to reformulate this question, or rather, series of questions more precisely. Vancouver's 21 suburbs have now grown together and are in search of what it means to become a regional city of more than 3 billion souls on the west coast of Canada, and the northernmost urban link anchoring the bioregion of Cascadia. What is our future? What can we become? That is the challenge with which I want to leave you. Thank you. Back there, I have to go back. My hearing is not all that
I can speak very loud, John.
Yeah.
So what do you think is at the root, given the beautiful kind of rhetoric of the regional growth strategy and so on and so forth, what do you feel is at the root of inability to collaborate, it seems, in this region, especially with regards to economic development?
Well, people do collaborate when they have to. And I think increasingly the pressure will be for for more collaboration. But, you know, of course, economic development, which is part of the problem, and also, of course, the set of opportunities, is is by its very nature a competitive process. And so this is why each municipality wants to go alone. But eventually they're growing together, and I mean physically as a pattern, they're growing together, and they're more closely connected with each other, partly through the different branches of the public transportation system that we have now, and the SkyTrain, and so on, so that they feel, which is of course a transportation system that's still, it's a pattern like a star, with Vancouver as the sun. But I'm looking forward to linkages that crisscross the region in all directions. But that may be some time before that really happens.
Is there any other questions?
Penny, maybe a proposition in response to the question, and I'd like John to comment if my proposition is a good explanation. Does it have to do with the accountability of the regional governance body, in that you don't have a democratically elected regional body, and therefore answering to the public and the constituents is different from that of a democratically elected municipal government.
Yeah, that's of course absolutely right, and it's one of the issues that we can debate.
Can we leapfrog into a more democratic regional governance?
Well, I don't have an opinion on this. It would be, you know, I haven't looked into this closely, and I don't think I'm prepared to give a view on this at the moment, but it's certainly something we all have to discuss. I burned my, I decided not to talk about things I don't understand. And when I first came here, I was asked to give a small talk at the city council, noonday lecture, and so on local government. And at that time, the question was put in the public sphere about election for city council, whether it should be on an all-city basis or on a ward basis. And I was in favor of wards. Then, but the voters obviously rejected it. So I think I better be quiet. Yeah. Anybody else?